All right, I'm going to now bring you our special interview with the Civil Aviation Minister, Jyotiraditya Scindia. But before I do that, I just want to put these things into a certain amount of perspective. 15, 20, 30 years ago, if anybody had asked you what are the biggest factors that are holding back the India story, people would have said infrastructure. Look at the roads, look at the airports, the worst airports in the world. Look at trains, look at ports, look at... Basically, infrastructure was the big issue. I've been at Davos many times. People used to say, why can't India fix its infrastructure? Now, the good news, and this is the big picture, is that has started to be sorted out across the board when it comes to power, when it comes to the railways, when it comes to ports, when it comes to the roads, as we were discussing last week. Infrastructure is gradually, actually not even gradually, rather fast, becoming an area which is not holding back the India story, but actually contributing to its acceleration. And keeping that in mind, let's now turn our attention to civil aviation, because airports, airlines, this was an area which was holding India back. India used to have the worst airports in the world. Now, many people would say it has some of the best airports in the world. Look at the airlines. The quality of Air India had deteriorated so sharply. Indian Airlines, you could barely fly in those. They've been privatized now, and hopefully the quality will start to come up. And that infrastructure push is happening across the civil aviation sector. I'm just going to give you some quick statistics. India is already the world's third largest air passenger market. We provide direct connectivity to more than 40 nations, indirect connectivity to more than 100 countries. The number of airports in the country has gone up from 74 in 2014 to 147 in 2022. And in many cases, the quality of those airports has also shot up quite substantially over the last 20 years or 25 years. And that's also been really notable. At 13.6 crore, air passenger traffic in India saw a 60% growth in 22-23. 15 airlines operated nearly 10 lakh flights in 2022, marking a 21% increase compared to 2021. However, domestic air passenger traffic is still 4% below pre-COVID levels, and that is something that has to be looked at. Passenger capacity at 6 major airports in India, though, is 19.2 crore. So all of this is going up, and it's crystal clear that the civil aviation sector is poised for a period of fairly extensive growth. And schemes like UDAN that have been announced by the government of India could actually boost that even more dramatically. You could have aviation markets opening up in areas that had never been opened up. A large number of new airports are coming in there. But why should you be interested in this wherever in the world you are? Because it's not just within India that the Indian civil aviation industry is making waves. India's growth story in air travel is providing a fillip to the global industry as well, specifically to aircraft manufacturers. In February this year, Air India announced the largest commercial aviation deal, not just in India, but in the world. The Tata-owned airline is buying 470 new planes from Airbus and Boeing. The deal likely to support 10 lakh jobs across 44 states in America. And that's not all, because there are around 1,200 aircraft on order by various Indian airlines. Indigo, for example, ordered 500. Go First, buying 72 planes. Akasa Air is going to acquire 56. Now, Vistara is buying 17. Of course, we'll have to see how that plays out with the merger. Upshot, this is going to have a hectic and a massive impact on the job market, both in India and across the world. And within India, there's a welcome change from reports of layoffs, because as Air India continues to proceed, that particular, the revitalization of Air India alone could be creating lakhs of jobs in India, according to some estimates. Look, this is all the good news. There seems to be a lot of activity, a lot of growth, a lot of buoyancy in the Indian aviation sector. Because so far what I've been telling you about is clear skies for the Indian aviation story, but there are some dark clouds also there, some turbulence that will have to be navigated. In recent weeks and months, there have been frequent reports of flyer misbehavior, for example, and more worrying, allegations of apathy by the flight crew. That is something that needs to be turned attention to. Customer service in general. Then there are technical slags in many airlines. SpiceJet, for example, operated at 50% capacity for much of 2022. There have also been safety concerns expressed in some areas. In 2021, near 40 near-collision incidents were reportedly investigated by the authorities. And on the economic front, the finances of airlines have been under stress for a while. and they could be affected by higher ATF prices and also by the depreciation of the rupee. Indian airlines across the board are projected to see a consolidated loss of something like $1.6 to $1.8 billion in 2023. Also, some experts are pointing out that only 4% of Indians actually fly. Now, that you could say that shows a very low penetration, which is true. It could also be seen positively, of course, because you can say that's such a large unserved market, people who can then go out and start to fly. So what's going to happen next? Is Indian aviation poised for takeoff? Is it already cruising? What lies ahead? Well, who better to put those questions to than the Civil Aviation Minister, Jyotiraditya Scindia. And I got a chance to catch up with him for a fairly detailed interview on what lies ahead. I'm just going to play that entire interview for you right now. And to try and understand what exactly is happening in the civil aviation sector in India, who better to talk to than the Minister for Civil Aviation, also of Steel, Jyotiraditya Scindia. Pleasure to have you with us, and thank you so much. I'm going to talk to you about infrastructure and flights and the big orders that are being done. But should we start off with passenger experience? And right now, one of the major irritants in passenger experience seems to be from other passengers. And what's happening? People, attacking members of the crew, urinating on people. Passenger behavior seems to have gone down the trail.
So first of all, Vikram, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure, as always, to be with you. I think this is more of a societal issue rather than a sectoral issue. I think we must remember that when we use public transport, whether it be buses, trains, or automobiles, or planes, we must be responsible not only towards ourselves, but towards other co-passengers, human beings, and society. And yes, you do have those stray incidents, and this happens, as you've probably experienced yourself, in the last couple of months on a worldwide basis. We have very strict, what we call in our civil aviation parlance, CARS, which is the civil aviation rules that are in place for action on these fronts. First of all, of course, is the airline's responsibility to report any such untoward incident. Once the airline does so through the pilot or the crew, then the civil authorities take over, and according to the Act, cases are filed or action is taken against the perpetrators, stroke perpetrators. And in all of these cases, such action has been taken. There have been a few cases where the airline has not complied with its responsibility of reporting such incidents. And in those cases, action even against the airline and the pilot and the crew has been taken by DGCA. So we are extremely clear in our mindset that there is zero tolerance for such behavior. And when this does happen, then we will certainly take action in the strictest possible manner.
So zero tolerance is something which you're saying. What do you think lies behind it? I mean, in some cases, just people drinking too much. In some cases,
it's mostly people who are inebriated. In some cases, a certain incident happens and it sparks up an altercation. But in each and every case, action is and will be taken.
One of the things, of course, that you're going to have to do when it comes to this aspect of behavior, these are people who are just clearly doing something wrong and action needs to be taken about them. But as your efforts to democratize civil aviation spread, as more and more people start to get onto the plane for the first time, then that certain amount of education will have to be there. Because sometimes it could be, in these cases, people are doing something wrong. They're just doing something wrong. In other cases, it could be they don't know what to do necessarily. So that's education.
There are probably, I may be going a little too far, but there are probably nil cases in that aspect.
Do you think so?
Yes. I think even thousands of first-time flyers, and I'll give you the example of Udan. Since Udan took off in 2016, we've had 220,000 flights. We've had 1 crore 17 lakh flyers who have benefited from Udan, 473 new routes that have been plied that probably would never have been plied before. 74 new airports, waterdromes and heliports that have been built in our portfolio through Udan. But I would say it is probably extremely rare, or probably no case of first-time flyers that have exhibited this sort of behavior.
So the people who are for the first time getting into a plane, who've never done it, they are still managing to follow the rules and do
It
things
is people
correctly.
like you and I who travel many times.
The spoiled, privileged types,
exactly.
having a drink too many, you think it's there, tum jante nahi ho main kaun hu, and misbehaving. with
Or
the
there's an altercation, or fuses run high, and an incident happens.
Let's move to the other aspect of the passenger experience, which is obviously the entire journey from coming to the airport, going through the airport, getting onto the plane, the quality of service that you're getting. And obviously it's improving, and it's improving dramatically. What's your vision on that? How do you see us heading forward on that?
So there are two segments of the value chain. One is the person who's desirous of traveling by air. The other is the service provider, which is the airline, that is desirous of taking people on its infrastructure from one point to the other. In between both of these parts of the value chain sits the infrastructure of the airport. Now, generally across the world, the airport is a single airport in that particular city, except for rather big cities like New York, or maybe now Delhi and Bombay coming up with 2 airports. Goa already has 2 airports. So I think that if you are the single gateway in that city, on you lies the responsibility to make sure that you are able to connect the desire of an individual with the service provider's desire to service that individual. And that you must do in the best possible manner to facilitate that process. Make that experience one such that the customer wants to travel again. We have seen a huge expansion in our infrastructure network in the country over the last 9 years. A country that had 74 airports built in 65 years of its independence. In the last 9 years, we have, under the Prime Minister's vision, doubled that number to 148, comprising of 74 new airports, waterdromes and heliports. And therefore, it's been an exponential growth curve. And let me, through you, also inform our viewers that this is only the beginning of the journey. Our target is to take that number of 148, number of 74, which has gone to 148, upwards of 200 in the next 3 to 4 years. So massive infrastructure is being built. But as we build that infrastructure, we must make the experience of the traveler also seamless through the airport. Which is why in the last year and a half, I have looked at the full operations process. We had certain clogging, if you will, or congestion in a number of airports last heavy season, October, November, because we were able to achieve numbers that were unfathomable before. Pre-COVID, our high was 420,000 odd passengers on a particular day. We broke that on multiple times during high season, and then crested that actually in off season to almost 460,000.
And that will only continue as more and more people are traveling, as more and more happens.
Absolutely. So therefore, airports need to be constantly upgrading themselves, need to create many more entryways into airports, need to create many more check-in counters, need to create many more security lanes, and also make boarding much more easier. So 2 or 3 steps that we have taken. One, we have increased the number of entry gates in our metro airports which were earlier restricted. Second, the security lines, which in an airport like Delhi, which is the largest airport in the country today.
And among the top now increasingly in the world in terms of traffic.
70 million today, going to 109 million by this October, hopefully. One of the largest airports in the world. It will be close to being beyond Atlanta. There were only 12 security lines for the large number of traffic that was coming through. And I myself, as you remember, visited the airport, and in a period of almost about 2 months, we've increased from 12 security lines to 25 security lines. That certainly cuts down the congestion. So therefore, you've got to look at it from an operations exercise point of view, look at where the bottlenecks are along the critical path and provide access and opening up of those bottlenecks. So for example, in the Delhi airport, much to a lot of people's chagrin, I broke down the VIP lounge. And in that VIP lounge, we put in 5 security lines. So for me, the common passenger is most important. Along with that, what we've introduced, just to finish off on that, to make the process much more seamless, is a new FRT, facial recognition technology system called Digiyatra, where from your home, when you upload all your information, you can seamlessly pass through from entry to check-in to security to your boarding gate to boarding the flight, all in a period of within 5 to 10 minutes, as opposed to going through a long experience. That's been introduced in 3 airports until 31st of March. I've introduced it in 4 more airports on the 31st of March. So 7 airports in the country now have Digiyatra operating.
So that's why we might need to find, so Digiyatra is one way, you let people use their faces to speed the entire process up. The other is to look at certain things and see whether they're required. You'll remember till, 10, 15 years ago, every time you landed in India, you had to fill out that disembarkation card, which has now been done away with. So the checking of people entering the airports, you think that is something that will continue to be required for security reasons and to prevent problems?
Yes and no. Certainly, yes, if you've not adopted Digiyatra. And if you have, then your entry is much more easier and much quicker. And I'm kind of amazed at the adoption rate of Digiyatra. Whereas in airports like Delhi and Bangalore, which see a huge amount of throughput, the adoption rates within 2 to 3 months of putting in place Digiyatra is close to about 10% or 11% of all flyers. In a place like Varanasi, and I must congratulate my airport director there, she's a lady, the adoption rate is close to 45%. So almost 1 in every 2 flyers in Varanasi is using Digiyatra. And therefore, with 4 more airports coming online now in the second round, I think you're going to see much more, and I think this is the need of the hour, because we've got to make the system much more facilitatory.
When we're looking at now the growth that you're talking about, there's domestic travel, which Udan and others are there, and I want to talk about that. But let's just look at international. Internationally, so many people flying to the US or Europe or any other place tend to go through the Middle East. They're flying on Emirates, they're flying on Etihad, they're flying on those airlines. Those planes seem to be filled with Indians. Surely one of the parts that we should be thinking about is point to point directly from India, fly directly to the US. Why are you going via the Middle East or any other place?
So you're absolutely right, Vikram. I think if you look at the analysis of the civil aviation industry in India, like all other industries across the spectrum, this industry also follows an S-shaped growth curve. The bottom end of the S is when an industry is in its infancy, and therefore growth is kind of almost flat or slow growth, the delta, the slope. Then you come to the middle part of the S, when the industry goes through growth phase. And then the top part of the S is when an industry approaches maturity, and therefore growth flattens out again. India, I believe, is in that inflection point between infancy and the growth phase. We have now entered the growth phase. And I believe that the growth rate in India is going to be exponential. Having said that, I think this is also a troubled legacy of the past. In the past, I believe that we've given out too much on many of our bilaterals. And therefore, I think it's important to do two things. One, to ensure that Indian carriers grow their wide-bodied aircraft, and that's something that I have been pushing for the last 1.5 years that I have been here. And I'm really glad to see airlines such as Air India and Indigo. Air India has posted the largest order not in Indian civil aviation history, but global civil aviation history of 470 aircraft, 250 with Airbus and 220 with Boeing. Between the two, almost 60 to 80 wide-bodied aircraft. And therefore, Air India is going to make a huge foray on direct routes. Indigo is also getting into wide-bodied aircraft. And therefore, they're also going to go across the 7 seas. And I think that is extremely important for India to be able to create its own hub for its own travelers.
But based on your understanding, somebody watching this in other parts of the world, do you genuinely feel that we are going to be in a situation 2 years, 3 years, 4 years from now where India will be a major international aviation hub and Indian airlines, various Indian airlines, will be global standard airlines, and that's what people should be flying, especially when they're coming to India?
Absolutely. I think we are already the 3rd largest domestic aviation market in the world. We have grown from 6 crore flyers in 13-14 to almost 14.5 crore flyers today. So we've more than doubled the market in the last 8 or 9 years, COVID notwithstanding. On the international side, we are at roughly 6 crore flyers, so we are at roughly 20.5 crore flyers. I see this growing to 40 crores over the next 4 to 5 years. So that's the potential of the market. We have grown our fleet size from 400 in 13-14 by almost 75% to 700. With these large orders of Air India and Indigo and Akasa and SpiceJet, I'm looking at a capacity addition of at least another 1,000 to 1,300 planes over the next 5 to 8 years. So I see our fleet going to 2,000 in the next 7 to 8 years. And therefore, yes, India will be a major market, not only for Asia, but for the world. Also do remember, Vikram, that when we talk about an industry, we talk about the market. And when we talk about the market, we talk about penetration. And if you look at penetration in India, when we talk about 14.5 crore flyers, it includes many people like yourself and me who make multiple trips in a year. So if you distill that and you actually look at discrete travelers in the country, that number is not going to be more than roughly about 3 to 4 crores in a country of a population of 130 crores. So what's your penetration rate today? It's hardly 3%, 3 to 4%. So therefore, you've got 96% to go. And today, people are yearning to travel by air. And therefore, the connectivity that the Prime Minister has provided through UDAN, where we have put up airports which were obliterated from the civil aviation map almost 50 years ago, places like Jharsuguda in Orissa, Rupsi in Assam, Kishangarh in Rajasthan, Darbhanga, which are now providing customers ranging between 50,000 to 5.5 lakhs per year from these satellite tier 2, tier 3 airports. And that means that this market is going to grow and connectivity is going to grow. And through that connectivity, people are going to travel much more by air.
So dramatic demand growth is coming, and you're saying that the infrastructure and the capacity and the supply will be there to encourage that. And then it becomes a virtuous cycle.
Correct. I mean, and just a case in point for you, if you take our 6 metros in the country today, we have close to 220 million throughput capability in the 6 metros. So Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, Kolkata. That is going to grow to 440 million by 2030.
Jyotiraditya Scindia, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you very much for having me.
All that infrastructure is also going to affect the other ministry which you're looking after, which is steel, but maybe that's a subject for another day.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, that was the Civil Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia in an exclusive interview.